Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Our own Lila Lee is the most innocent creature on God's earth.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, my weird dad's weird podcast about weird movies.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wake Up Heavy, Recollections of Horror. This is a special episode, side episode, whatever you want to call it, on two films that kind of popped into my head recently, and as I was watching both of them, I realized that there were numerous similarities between the two. The first one is Richard Blackburn's 1974 film, Lemora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural. And the second one is from Jaromil Jires from 1970, called Valerie and Her Week of Wonders.
Little girl, where are you hiding? If you don't come out, I'll get Lemora. Little girl, where are you? Your little girlie run off.
Run off? You stupid idiot, you let her run off. Hello, Lila. I'm Lemora. That escape was very clever of you. Now, go up into your room and get dressed in the clothes I've laid out. It's the first open door at the end of the hall. Lila. Did I frighten you, Lila? I'm sorry. The mirror is broken, but you can see how lovely you are in my eyes.
You're so pretty, little boy. I'll take care of you. Don't be frightened.
Lila. Did you really think you could escape so easily? The further you thought you were getting away from me, the closer you came. You never had a chance. Each one of your moves has been directed from the very beginning, like a chess game.
sladce spí, až se probudíš, má lásko, nevyzrát své tajemství.
As things often happen or work out this way, these both popped into my head, like I said recently. I'm not really sure why. I started watching Valerie while I was poking around Canopy's site, and I sort of gained access via a friend of mine who works at the CSU Fresno. I had been looking for different films, and then I just kind of started browsing, and I watched Valerie a couple of years ago, or gosh, I don't know how long it's been now, whenever Hulu still had the Criterion collection, which was one of the main reasons why I joined, because the rest of their catalog wasn't that great at the time. And then, of course, Filmstruck came around and the Criterion collection moved there. That has since folded, and Criterion now has their own streaming channel, which I have not joined because of what happened with Filmstruck, and also because most of that catalog is available on Canopy, which is free through university libraries and county and or city libraries, and I am taking advantage of that. Lemora I saw a couple years ago, and I really don't remember how that one came up. I had it in my IMDb watch list. Why I put it there, I don't know. I don't remember reading about it. Maybe I read about it on Horror Movie A Day. I'd have to go back and check if he did a blog entry on this. I think he may have. And then it popped up somehow on a search some way or another, and I tried to track it down and couldn't find it streaming anywhere at that time. I think it's available to stream on Amazon right now, not on Prime, but as a rental, and maybe a couple other places. I will put that Just Watch link on the show notes for this. So I watched it on YouTube. This time when I watched it, and I don't know if it's the same one I watched last time, I ended up having to watch a subtitled version. It's subtitled in Spanish, which doesn't really bother me. The picture was pretty decent. There's an 80-minute version, there is an 85-minute version, and there is a 113-minute version. And I tried desperately to track the long version down. It's supposedly the director's cut, the DVD that came out in 2004. According to the description, the director's cut, but it's listed everywhere I looked except for on barnesandnoble.com. It's listed as 85 minutes. And I even reached out to Synapse Films on Twitter for confirmation. This may just be them, whoever is posting it for sale, if they're taking it from IMDb, or maybe Synapse has it printed incorrectly on their cover of the DVD. And so I didn't take the plunge because I didn't want to buy it and have it be the 85-minute version. I wanted to see the full cut. And barring that, didn't get any response from Synapse Films. No one else that I reached out to could answer the question, so I just rewatched the 85-minute version. And to be honest, another 28 minutes would probably have put it over the edge of boredom, unless it was, I don't know what was cut. I have no idea. At 85 minutes, it was plenty long, and so watching the full cut, I'd still like to, but I would be curious if it would make it move faster or even slower. Not that it's boring, but 85-90 minutes is just about perfect running time for most horror movies, unless you've got a whole bunch going on, and there isn't a whole lot going on in this movie. And actually, Valerie is even shorter. I think it's less than 80 minutes, and there's a lot going on in that movie, and I'll kind of get to that in a minute. Lemora is one of my psychotronic films, and I'm sure I discussed it on that episode that had previously been on the Patreon-only site, and I will discuss that at the end of this episode. So I had heard about it many years ago and then forgot about it for the longest time until it came up sometime within the last couple of years. But let's use this little synopsis and or description to start this discussion. Lemora, the Lady Dracula, 1974 media cinema, Producer Robert Fern, director Richard Blackburn, screenwriters Richard Blackburn and Robert Fern, also released as The Legendary Case of Lemora and Lady Dracula. And then the title I've been using, Lemora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural, is what's used on the Synapse Films DVD and most other versions that I have found. During the 1920s in Georgia, a female vampire, Leslie Gilb, tricks a 13-year-old church singer, Cheryl Smith, into visiting her home in the woods. This interesting low-budget oddity features ghoul-like beast people and a sensual vampire whose followers are little children. The Catholic Film Board gave it a condemned rating. Director Blackburn also plays a preacher. Cheryl, Rainbow Smith, is also in Caged Heat and Phantasm Comes Again, an Australian porno feature. Cheryl Smith was in a lot of exploitation films, B pictures in the 70s and early 80s. She was a denizen of the Sunset Strip in the late 60s. She was associated with the Runaways for a brief time when I think Lita Ford and maybe one or two of the other original members had left, and led a hard life and died, I want to say, in the early 2000s from hepatitis due to her drug use. But she plays Lila Lee, who sings in a church somewhere in the South. The film was made in, I want to say on the interview that I saw with Blackburn, somewhere in the San Diego area. And as the preacher, he employs a very kind of stereotypical Southern accent. And he hasn't done a whole lot, but he did write or co-write Eating Raoul, which is a cult film that a lot of people really like that I just don't get. Hasn't done a whole lot. Didn't do a whole lot, I should say. I think he directed an episode of Tales from the Dark Side and only has 3 directing credits to his name. He did do a little bit of acting outside of Lemora as well. He was in Eating Raoul as probably one of the victims. I don't really remember. And then he was in an exploitation film called Stunt Rock, and I just listened to the episode on that and another movie I can't remember the name of, from No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, and I will link that in the show notes as well because it was a funny episode. Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, I'm not even going to attempt a synopsis of that film. For one thing, it's quite confusing to watch and convoluted and surreal and not so much a straight narrative film, which shouldn't keep you from watching it. It's amazing. It is really fun to watch. It's just really hard to follow. We have characters or actors playing different characters, or maybe they're the same character and they're just pretending to be somebody else. Valerie lives with her grandmother, who may be her mom or her aunt, or is pretending to be her aunt and is probably a vampire. The kind of villain of the story is called the Constable, but he's also referred to as the Polecat and might be Valerie's dad. And then we have her kind of love interest, who she calls Orlik throughout. And of course, this is the Czech name for him, and he's called Eaglet in the subtitles. So that's confusing in and of itself. He may or may not be her brother. It seems like that's cleared up at some point where he's not her brother, but then while I was watching it, it seemed like they kind of backtracked on that. They may have the same dad. I don't know. It's very, very confusing, but it's part of the charm of the film. It's a fairy tale, so it has elements of fantasy and surrealism throughout, which is one of the strong similarities between this and Lemora. They both play as childlike fantasies as fairy tales, as dark fairy tales, going back to the Brothers Grimm and things like that. Both of our heroines, Lila Lee in Lemora and Valerie in Valerie, are 13-year-old nymphets whose beauty and innocence makes them irresistible to virtually everybody else in their respective films. And when I say nymphette, I don't mean that like Lolita. They're not exuding any kind of sexuality. It's just that everybody in these movies, it seems like they want to possess that innocence and that grace and beauty. And to get it, they think that they need to do it in a sexual way. There are hints of incest and lesbianism in both.
What an exciting figure you have. You must be very popular.
In both films, the young heroines are pursued by men of the cloth. In Lemora, the reverend that Lila had been staying with because her dad is a gangster and is on the run from the law, he fights his temptation but ends up following her to Astaroth, where she is trying to find her dad. And just a side note, that name Astaroth, I thought, boy, that's got to be from something. And it just sounded kind of Lovecraftian to me, but I looked it up, and Astaroth is called the Great Duke of Hell and is part of the evil trinity with Beelzebub and Lucifer. So this is where Lemora lives, surrounded by warring factions of vampires. In Valerie, the preacher who, again, may or may not be her dad. I may be conflating that with the other people that could possibly be her dad. But I think he has an interest in her grandmother/mother/aunt. But then he tries to seduce Lemora at one point. And of course, it's all her fault. So she suffers a horrible fate, kind of, which I won't get too deep into as to not spoil the film. And Valerie, more so than Lemora, kind of plays out, and I saw, this isn't an original thought of mine, but once I read it, I was like, oh yeah, it plays out a little bit like a lot of the European softcore movies from that time period. When I read that description, I immediately thought of Emmanuel. For those of you that had Cinemax back in the 80s, know about those movies. But it's, as I mentioned though, everybody, male and female, tries to get a piece of Valerie during the movie. So it definitely has that feel to it. And then in both film, we have the idea of vampires, and Lemora is a vampire in that film. And in Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, there are numerous people who could or could not be possibly vampires. And many of the townspeople have kind of an ashen look to them, other than Valerie, of course. So her grandmother, who she's living with, is possibly a vampire. The aunt, who comes to stay later after the grandmother disappears, is most likely a vampire. The constable/polecat might be the king of the vampires. And they all need Valerie's blood to stay alive. And Valerie uses these pearl earrings throughout to get her out of numerous instances of trouble. The warring factions of vampires in Lemora, I originally kind of thought that one of the groups, because they're hairy and look more like werewolves, were in fact werewolves. But the more I read about it, it seems like it's sort of the same kind of scenario where they're degenerating or aging, and this is a problem in Valerie as well. So another similarity that I really wasn't even aware of until I did a little bit more research. So in the fairy tale battles of Lemora versus Valerie, everybody wins because they're both very interesting movies about young girls being pursued by vampiric creatures of all sorts. And that metaphor of vampirism as kind of a plague or epidemic is apparent in both. and I think referred to as one or the other in each film. There's the Astaroth look, the epidemic in Lemora, and there is much talk of a foul plague in Valerie. I will link to the Projection Booth podcast episode on Valerie in the show notes. They did you know what? I don't think this was part of the Czech Timber series last September. Maybe it was. I don't know. I didn't listen to it then. I listened to it a couple months ago. Maybe that's probably what put it in my head recently. So answered my own question there. But it's, of course, much longer and much more in-depth than this. I'm just kind of talking about two movies that I watched recently that seem to coincidentally have some similarities. Both very fun. If I had to, this isn't really a versus, but if I had to pick a winner overall, it would probably be Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. It's just a little bit more interesting to watch because there is a lot going on, but both worth checking out for sure if you can track them down. Valerie is probably a little bit easier to find. And if anybody out there happens to listen to this and knows the answer to the question about the Synapse Films DVD version as to its length, please let me know. I may actually purchase it. That brings up a purchase that I did make recently of a film that I had been wanting to do for this show and was kind of waiting for it to show up on TCM, and it hasn't. And it is not available to stream anywhere at all, called Possession, which I have talked about numerous times and will hopefully do an episode on, but I would like to get a guest for that. So I'm eyeballing a few people. Hopefully I can get in contact with them, and hopefully they'll want to discuss the film. If not, I will do it myself. I am looking at finally starting another side series, just more of a supplemental aspect of the show to get other people's recollections of horror, their movies that dug under their skin way back when. My friend Ronnie and I, my movie buddy, the sole Patreon member while it lasted, and so we just need to set that up and get it going, and then I will be looking at other people to discuss those movies from their past that really made an impression. The cool thing about that is that, for one thing, I'll have somebody else on, but it could be a movie that I don't particularly care for or possibly never saw. That would be a little bit different than the bulk of the show, which is generally about things I like and like a lot. And not to be too gimmicky about it, but I think I'll leave those movies as a surprise. I mean, obviously you'll figure it out within the first couple of minutes of the episode, but I won't announce the movies, just the guest, and then we will dive into that. And then I wanted to, since I just brought it up, discuss that Patreon situation and why I stopped it. It was something that I hesitated to do in the first place. I thought I had kind of come up with a good solution for that, but with one Patreon who is a good friend of mine and really shouldn't be paying anything for extra episodes, also with the kind of payout scenario through Patreon itself, I don't know, goofy stuff happening with that, and it wasn't really working how I hoped, so I stopped it. There is always the possibility in the future that it will be started up again, but you know what? I don't mind not getting paid for this stuff in any way. I did receive a generous donation from other friends a couple months back, and that was nice, and it technically got used for some rentals and purchases to help with the show, so that was great. The last thing I wanted to do was throw in something that I had included on the Patreon teaser for April regarding explicit content. So I'll tack that on at the end here as a clarification of that. Not all the shows are explicit in nature, but I'll let that clear that up. I just wanted to point out that April has been a very good month for Wake Up Heavy. That is in large part due to Mike White's appearance on the Taxi Driver episode and his promoting that and Eraserhead on the Projection Booth blog and social media. And so it looks like in April here, we will have as many listens as all of 2018, which of course only ran from August to December when I started the show, and has more than doubled the previous plays for January, which saw Mike on Eraserhead. That was up till this point had been the most quote-unquote successful month for Wake Up Heavy as far as plays go. I just wanted to note that someone has listened to, and probably not actually listened to, there have been about 50 plays of the Let's Scare Jessica to Death episode over the past 3 or 4 weeks. And I know that that's not all actual plays because it's all coming from one person in one location. I am not sure what the situation is there, but if you have listened to it 50 times, thanks. If it's a matter of just auto plays and or something like that, then, thanks for driving up the play count, I guess. Yeah, so I found that odd. And almost every day there's been plays for that, and it's always the same person in the same town. So, okay, so here is that information about explicit content. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to wake up heavy. Hi, and welcome back. I just wanted to briefly talk about explicit content, and I've noticed this for quite some time now and just haven't brought it up on a main episode. I have the show marked as explicit through SoundCloud, and this is what iTunes imports for the show as a whole. Now, for individual episodes, I may or may not mark them explicit. It's kind of annoying that iTunes doesn't differentiate what's on the actual episode itself. It just takes that general metadata and keeps it for the whole show. But not all episodes have explicit content. If that's keeping you from listening, you can always check out the SoundCloud website itself for Wake Up Heavy. And on the player, it will say explicit or not. And I view explicit content as anytime there are F-bombs, either from myself or in clips. If the subject matter of the movie is not horror, that's everything I talk about, but if it may be a rape revenge story or there's a sexual nature, even if it doesn't really get explored in detail on the show, I might mark that explicit. And my reasoning for this is just for my own peace of mind. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and there are a few of my shows that I would probably be unhappy about her listening to if they were from me or from someone else. And also, I don't want to get flagged. I don't want the show to get flagged on iTunes for inappropriate content. So I think on iTunes, everything shows up as explicit. Not every episode is, but there's really not a whole lot I can do since the RSS feed is being pulled from SoundCloud. So, just to clarify, not every episode is explicit. And of course, everybody's definition of explicit is different, but I'm just using those few guidelines. I would say for the most part, the show is PG-13. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, definitely send them to me. But again, you can always check SoundCloud and see if there's a little box with explicit on the player itself. That's usually where it shows up. And we will see you soon with a new episode.